president of the Center for Security Policy. Go to securefreedom.org or counterjihad.com. Frank, a lot to get to with you today. But first of all, you got my broader point, which is that why is illegal immigration the only law where there is a sanctuary city? I mean, if we can pick and choose laws, I'm pretty sure having a closed border and a sane immigration system is one of the more reasonable laws if you want to look at the entire U.S. code, because I could find about a million things that are outdated or nonsensical that we could talk about. Why is this the only one that's sanctuary city? Is there sanctuary only for breaking our immigration laws?
Well, I guess you could include in that Congress exempting itself from other laws that they applied to the United States population. But I think it's the most prominent. And you're right, Alex, of course, the most outrageous of these carve-outs from what is a sensible policy from a national security point of view. And it, calls to mind what, of course, the Supreme Court's going to be talking about today, namely the president's unchallenged constitutional and, delegated authority by the Congress to keep out people who will be threats to the national security. And, it is simply the triumph of the radical left and their agenda to defy the laws of the United States and to bring in people who will be whether they're overtly hostile or they're simply interested in changing this country, the ballot box even. But nonetheless, they've got an agenda, and the carve-outs don't make sense. I hope the Supreme Court, in the case of the president's sensible orders to pause immigration from countries that are either failed states or hostile states, until we've really got in place a means of ensuring that we're not importing more jihadists. These are sensible policies. Sanctuary cities and states are not sensible policies, and I hope the president will stay the course, the Supreme Court will do the right thing, and the American people will stand behind these common sense approaches.
All right. So, Frank, the question that I opened the show with today, was that I watched the state dinner, and it's so beautiful, and I love the idea of how it'll enrage the left. It can't hurt that it'll probably make the president seem more reasonable around the world and more legitimate around the world. I don't see that as a bad thing, though. Of course, as I mentioned to Lou in Canada, I don't tend to look at French public opinion as a good sign, though I can't imagine that it hurts in this case. But in the meantime, we got this caravan is showing up at the border. We've got incredible drama with North Korea. We've got incredible drama with Iran. The immigration policies are not getting fixed. We've got the Masters of the Universe. I've got an exclusive story now at Breitbart News where we've got a Google search manipulation can swing as much as 80% of undecided voters. They respond about 40% in either direction to positive or negative tweaking of headlines or tweaking of search terms. If they are fed positive terms, they'll swing positively for that candidate. If they're fed negative terms, they'll swing negative for that candidate. And some of it just seems sort of silly to me, but maybe I'm just too much of a cynic. So tell me I'm wrong here.
That you're a cynic? No.
Well,
look,
yeah,
you've set a rich table there. There's so many things to talk about. I think all of them are more important than the state dinner, to be honest with you. So you're certainly right on that. But could I just hone in on that last point? Because Robert Epstein's work is of absolutely transcendent importance to the future of this country. On Breitbart and elsewhere, many of us are expressing real concern about what these IT giants, these monopolies, frankly, let's call them what they are. And by the way, I throw into the mix of Google and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube another one that doesn't get the same kind of scrutiny, but that needs it, and that is Wikipedia. This ostensibly, objective recounter of facts is actually, just like the rest of them, an instrument of political warfare being used by the left against conservatives, against the Republicans more generally, but specifically conservatives. Well, now what Robert Epstein is showing, and thank you for calling attention to this, as you do so many important things, Alex, we've got a situation here where they're going to change the politics of this country by the manipulation of who gets to see what information and which information that is supportive of a certain candidate is put forward and what information that is not or that is harmful to another candidate is withheld. I mean, these are absolutely totalitarian techniques. They have to be held accountable for it. And frankly, I don't see any alternative but breaking up these monopolies to ensure that they can't use the kind of power that they've accrued simply through, domination of the marketplace and the protections that the federal government has given them from liability if they behave in a manner that is, in this fashion or others, I think, biased, dishonest, disreputable, and manipulative. So these are really important points, and we can get to all of the rest of the foreign policy agenda if you care to, but I think that's, as I say, transcendent importance.
Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy. I think you're exactly right on this, and is not a secondary issue. This is a primary issue for us. And again, I would like to see the White House drive a policy agenda on this. Luckily, we had some clips. We'll play these later. Ted Cruz is out there, and he's becoming the champion of this issue, which is probably a good sign for him. And I think it's a good issue for him because it's one. It's great for the country, and it's one of these ones where when people realize what's happening, I think there's going to be a lot of people left of center as well who are who come on board and say, okay, I understand. Maybe even though we share politics here, this is very risky to have a handful of tech oligarchs determine what's free speech and what's not. Frank, we had a lot more to talk about. Let's continue with the new Iran deal. Is there a new Iran deal? Do you have any of the details? I like the idea that we're ditching the old one, but what are we replacing it with? Do we know?
I certainly don't, Alex. What concerns me is not so much that there is a deal as that there is a willingness being expressed to continue haggling about a new deal. Now, if the French president is indicating to ours that he's willing to play a cooperative role and try to improve or fix, as they say, this fatally flawed deal, I can understand the seductiveness to the president of going along with that. I fear, especially when the Iranians say they're not changing anything. And I don't think any of the other Europeans are interested in changing anything either. I'm not even sure the French are. But the point is, there's not going to be changes that will materially affect this deal. It's not simply a question of keeping a bad deal in place longer, Alex. That's one of the things that's being brooded about at the moment. Just, stop the sunset provisions. Well, it's still a bad deal. And the thing that makes it bad is it pretends we're doing something to restrict Iran's nuclear ambitions and programs for achieving them. And we're not. And extending the deal longer just, again, maintains this sort of placebo effect while nothing is done to prevent the emergence of this very dire threat. So I'm really concerned, I guess, that we won't have a deal that is actually new or better or fixes the problem. We'll just see some excuse given to continue to negotiate, to continue to talk, and to perpetuate effectively this very, very defective arrangement, contrary to what the president understands needs to be done, which is to replace it or scrap it altogether, and do so quite quickly because the threat is metastasizing from Iran.
Yes, that's exactly right. So what are you looking for? What are the key things that you think are essential that we move on from and we move towards?
Well, I think you have to actually stop the Iranian program. And that means that they can't continue to have centrifuges spinning. They can't continue to be processing uranium. They can't continue to have sites that are off limits to inspection. where the work is being done, assuredly, is in covert underground military facilities that inspectors aren't even asking to go see because they know they're going to be told no, let alone actually getting into. So all of this creates this sort of Potemkin idea that the Iranians can continue beavering away at all of the necessary activities to have nuclear weapons, and somehow we're actually keeping them from doing it because there's this piece of paper saying that they won't. It's rubbish. And so I think the president has been right in saying, I'm done with this. I think he should walk away from it. John Bolton has repeatedly recommended how to do that. He's got a plan B. We're constantly told there is no plan B. He's got one. He's now in place as the national security advisor. Thank God to help engineer that, and I hope that's where we're going to wind up.
Okay, Frank, I actually have so much to talk to you about today. Are you able to hold over the break?
Absolutely.
Okay, so hang on with me. I'm going to ask you about Pompeo. I'm going to ask you about North Korea. I'm also going to ask you, we're going to go back in time for when I was out on my West Coast swing. I'm going to get your thoughts on imminent World War III, which is what I was. Yes, yeah, that's right. It's actually, a funny story.
That late model Jaguar. I want to ask you about that.
Yeah, you can. It's an interesting thing now because now some of these luxury car companies, they're making these sort of entry-level cars that are a fraction of the price of a high-end Tahoe that you can get now, which is but it did sound more dramatic the way I described it that way.
It did.
For the guests. Yeah, exactly. That's the point.
For
It's
the
just good radio,
audience,
All right, quick.
Especially.
Thank you. Quick break. Hang with me. We'll be right back. All right, back to work. Frank Gaffney's here, president for the Center for Security Policy. Go to securefreedom.org or counterjihad.com to check out what Frank's up to. So, Frank, we could do more car talk, and we could get into in-depth details about all of my Hertz points I've accumulated over the years and the benefits that I have accrued. But I do think we should get back to the world. And let me get your thoughts on what's happening with North Korea and the fact that the president is going to be meeting with Kim Jong-un. He praised Kim Jong-un as honorable yesterday, I think was the word he used for him, which was sort of bizarre, but the president has his way of communicating. And I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on this one, though I certainly don't agree with that assessment. What do you think is going to happen leading up to the president's meeting with Kim? And do you think that this really does have the potential to lead to denuclearization? Hey, guys,
well, on the second,
Frank, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
On the second,
ahead, Frank,
Alex, I think it's anybody's guess. My personal assessment, based on a lot of hard experience, is that like Lucy and the football, Charlie Brown is going to be kicking into thin air again. I give the president credit for saying he's not going to put up with that. If he feels that that's what he's getting himself into going into this thing, he's not going to go. And if he finds himself in the middle of it when he's meeting with Kim Jong-un, he's going to respectfully exit. And I think that's exactly the right kind of message to send. If you're going to do this, my concern about calling him honorable, Alex, is I think what he was trying to get at, and I understand it in a way, is he's been living up to what he said he was going to do so far as we can tell. And he did add that caveat. We may, again, as with Iran, but remember, these guys are joined at the hips. So when we see Iran using underground bunkers that we cannot penetrate to see or inspect or attack, for that matter, their covert nuclear activities, you can bet those facilities exist in North Korea as well. They collaborate on all of these things, whether it's tunneling or whether it's ballistic missiles or whether it's nuclear weapons. The North Koreans and the Iranians are, completely synced up. So the kinds of concerns that the president has about Iran apply in spades to North Korea. The difference is North Korea has now a bunch of nuclear weapons. And more to the point, in terms of its honorability, it's an unfortunate choice of words to all of those North Koreans who are living under the jackboot heel of this horrifically repressive, really I mean, almost
Yes.
historically repressive regime, it puts Stalin to shame in terms of its application of Stalinism. So I think those are the kinds of things that raise concerns in the minds of a lot of the president's supporters, among whom I am one, that this thing may wind up legitimating. That may not be the intention, but nonetheless legitimating this horrific regime, even if it makes some progress, and I hope it will, but I'm dubious, towards its denuclearization.
All right, so let's move quickly because we only have a couple minutes left. Mike Pompeo is going to be confirmed. I think this is great news. Rand Paul got some concessions about the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war from him in order to get his vote, which I thought was very clever and probably will end up helping Pompeo in the longer run. Also, your thoughts on all this?
Well, I'm very pleased that Rand Paul was willing to change his mind, and whatever the pretext was, it's a good thing that he supported Mike Pompeo. I believe, and I know him a bit, he is a man who I think in his military service, in his time in the business community in Kansas, in his time in the Congress of the United States representing people of Kansas, and as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, he has demonstrated himself to be a guy who has the potential to be one of the best secretaries of state we have ever had in our nation's history. And heavens knows, for the reasons that you mentioned a moment ago, Alex, we're in a world of hurt. And it's a time when we need a guy with the qualities that Mike Pompeo brings to bear. And I would consider those to be both a clarity about the nature of evil in the world and a recognition that there are military techniques, peace through strength, as President Reagan has called it, as President Trump has called it, that need to be brought to bear in the furtherance of our national security objectives, just as we need to bring to bear, and I think he will, effective diplomacy. But we need this kind of guy, and I'm thrilled that he is going to get confirmed, please God, very soon.
Yes, I think so, and I think it is a good thing. It's a great thing, even. Thanks, Frank Gaffney. Go to securefreedom.org or counterjihad.com. I didn't get your thoughts on whether or not we're entering into World War III. The fact that I did not insist on asking it should indicate where my viewpoint is on that, which is that we're not there. We're not going into World War III. Maybe we'll get that next week. Thanks, Frank. Always enjoy the time.